It's wonderful to see all you folks. It's wonderful to see all you folks here for this wonderful magazine that Sean and crew have put together. We should give them a nice round of applause. I know. Before I speak about Sam Allen, I brought an original letter. I have 162 letters from Sam. And one of the things that I'm a diehard supporter of is snail mail. There are two groups of people in society that snail mail is very important to. One group is veterans, people who are in active military service. I can't explain to you how depressing it is if you don't get a letter while you're in the military, especially if you're overseas. And the other is inmates in the various prisons around the country. So snail mail is very, very important. And in this time of quickening where people send emails and are texting all the time, snail mail seems to be a dying art. But one of the things that was really precious to me was that I could write Sam Allen and he would write me back, that I could write Dennis Brutus and he would write me back. I have 1,000 letters from Dennis Brutus, letters from Etheridge Knight, letters from Gwendolyn Brooks, just to name a few. So it's very important, and if you're in a mentee and mentor relationship, you know, that should be going on. Also, at the end of the day, when critics and scholars come to get your papers, the papers that will be most valuable are those letters. There was an exchange of letters, or 5,000 letters between Langston Hughes and Arna Bontemps, who were both, of course, pillars of the Harlem Renaissance. At least 500 of those letters have been gathered and published. But that's the kind of important communication that should be going on between writers. I can't begin to tell you, and if you're a mentee, you should be very humble. You know, first of all, your mentor is never going to teach you all their secrets. That's just not going to happen. And I maintain that tradition. I'll tell you certain things, but not everything. Experience is the best teacher. But I brought this particular letter. Sam said to me, wrote this December 6, 1989. Lamont, thought you'd like to see the article. R.E. Jimmy got a call on machine from Dennis. We'll try to see him Sunday. He sent me this article which had to do with James Baldwin. And there's a very significant quote. Baldwin said, "All art is a kind of confession. All artists, if they are to survive, are forced at last to tell the whole story, to vomit the anguish up." And Langston Hughes said, "A poet should hang themselves with their own words." The one thing I liked about meeting and hanging out with Etheridge Knight for 9 years was that Etheridge emphasized several things. One, poetry comes from 3 places: the head, the heart, and the belly. The head, the heart, and the belly. The most powerful poems come from the heart and the belly. You pretty much can listen to a poet and know instantly where they're coming from, whether they're just doing intellectual perambulations on the page and hiding behind that, or if they are really sharing their soul with you. I met Sam Allen at the American Poetry Center. Margot Chu Barringer was head of this organization that no longer exists, called the American Poetry Center. And it was an event held at the University of the Arts. And on the bill were Etheridge Knight, Sam Allen, Mari Evans, Naomi Magid Long, and Derek Walcott was supposed to show up, but he didn't. And my daughter was 3 months old. Aaron Perry was there. And something just said, you should talk to that man. Now, I knew Sam's work. He has a very famous poem about Satchel Paige. And something said, you know, talk to him. And we just hit it off. And he was my mentor for 30 years. We did some things like went to Nicaragua during the Sandinista Revolution in 1988, when it was still a hot war. We went to the Mosquito Coast together. And we had to take this boat ride up through the jungle. It was a 7-hour boat ride, and the jungle came right up to the boat. And the boat was riddled with bullet holes. And there were about 100 of us on the boat, and they sent 12 Sandinista soldiers with us in case we got ambushed. So as we're sailing up this river, I tell Sam, I said, Sam, you know, we could be ambushed at any time. And he's like, Lamont, I think you're being paranoid. I said, he's talking to a Vietnam veteran, right? And I said, Sam, I know when I'm being watched. So we went up to the Mosquito Coast. We commiserated with the poets there for 3 days, and then we sailed back down. 2 weeks after we left, the Contras ambushed the boat. 27 people were wounded, 2 killed. One was a black minister who was shot in the butt from South Jersey. I cut the article out of the Philadelphia Inquirer and sent it to Sam. And he's like, oh my God, that could have been us. I said, I told you. The other thing was that we also were in Paris together for the reunion of the surviving black expatriates who were part of the black expatriate community in Paris in the 50s and 60s, i.e. Jimmy Baldwin, Richard Wright, Langston Hughes, John A. Williams, Ollie Harrington. And it was really very powerful to, first of all, it was my first trip to Paris, and Richard Wright had published some of Sam's early poems in Présence Africaine, which is a publication for black writers in Paris. And he told me many stories. You know, I had sort of secretly in my heart, I really wanted to know about Richard Wright, you know, when I was in college, and I was envious of people who knew people who had been on the scene and were imparting this information to them. But one day, here it was. You know, Sam was a witness. He was there. He could tell me about Richard Wright. In fact, Sam was one of the last people to see Richard Wright alive because he was on his way to Mexico. And Richard Wright told him at the time, he said, if you hear about something happening to me, know that it was no accident. And that same week, Langston Hughes dropped in to see Richard Wright, and Langston said, you look like you're all dressed up for a funeral. And Sam was in Mexico when word came that Richard Wright was dead under mysterious circumstances. So it was very powerful to be there, to see Ellen Wright and Julia Wright, to meet all of these characters who had left America because somehow they found a little bit more freedom in America than in Paris than they did here in the United States, which was principally, and I'm not saying the French aren't racist, they are, but at the time their racism was focused on the Algerians, so they let the black So, and then while I was there, you know, I had these romantic notions in my head. Well, like, I'm going to be like James Baldwin. I'm going to be like Richard Wright. I'm going to, you know, I want to be an expat. You know, I'm going to come live in Paris and sit in cafes all day. And this other black woman who was there looked at me and she said, "Do you know what's happening here?" Now that was in 1992. And I began to pay attention. And I began to notice that there was this xenophobia that was beginning to manifest in Paris. You know, the National Front. And it's only gotten much worse since 1992. In fact, it's infected all of Europe, actually. So Sam was, you know, he was the grandfather I never had, but he was also this senior, elegant writer, a Harvard-educated lawyer, a veteran of World War II, and he loved watching me as I was raising my daughter, and I would tell him different things that my daughter was doing, and oftentimes I would take my daughter with me when I would go meet Sam in New England. And we also met up and walked into Mexico together. The only time I've ever been in Mexico was I went with Sam Allen and we walked into Juarez. Now, that was before all the hell broke loose there. So we had a lot of great memories, and I once asked Sam, I said, "Sam, can I quote from your letters?" He said, "Yeah, when I'm dead." So now I'm quoting from his letters. He also taught me he was also good friends with Sterling Brown, the late poet Sterling Brown, who taught at Howard University for 40 years. And Sterling Brown could have passed for a white man if he had wanted to. But Sam did the eulogy for Sterling Brown. But he was always in my corner. And one time I said to him, "Sam, I'm out here running with the big dogs." And Sam said, "Lamont, you're a big dog yourself." But he taught me what it meant to be humble. Today, in this whirlwind climate and atmosphere of MFAs and people that want to get their 15 minutes of fame, you run into all these writers who are so full of themselves. And my mother always taught me to be humble. And the thing is this, the more full of yourself that you are, your powers begin to diminish. But the more humble you are, your powers are sustained, if not increased. So I would like to read a poem. This was published in my book, In the Kitchens of the Masters. And it was after watching Sam read his most famous poem about Nat Turner. Two of Sam's most famous poems is one to Nat Turner, and the other one is to Harriet Tubman.